Patty, a mom to 2 girls, a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. Today we are going to talk about baby-led weaning, which is the method of starting solids that I used for my 3-year-old and that we've just started with my 6-month-old Juliana. So baby-led weaning, if you don't know, is the style of teaching your baby to eat where you skip baby food, you skip purees, you skip all those things, and you go straight to table food and whatever you're eating at the table. So before we get into the details, go ahead and click the subscribe button below and make sure to like the video. Now first we'll talk about the requirements that you have to have in order to do baby-led weaning, and that is that baby must be at least 6 months old. No sooner than that. Baby-led weaning, when you do table food, you have to make sure that their gut is established enough that they're not going to have any consequences digesting and all that sort of thing. So baby must be 6 months old. Baby must also be able to sit by themselves unassisted. If you have to prop them up in a bumbo seat or with a boppy behind them or between pillows or something to help them sit, then they're not ready. They must be able to sit unassisted. They also must have lost their tongue thrust reflex. So when babies are born, they basically have this reflex that pushes anything that touches their mouth out. And that is to avoid choking. It's basically to protect them. At around 6 months, they will lose that reflex. And in order to do this method, they need to have lost it. And finally, you want baby to make sure that they are starting to get the pincher grasp. 6 months is a little early. They're not going to be, you can't look for this motion specifically because baby likely won't be doing that. But they might be, using a hand or using their whole hand, but kind of also trying to use that. It's called the pincher grasp. So you want to make sure they have started to develop that motion a little bit. And then over the next few months, they will continue developing it as you introduce more foods, and you'll see them start to do this motion quite a lot. A common misconception is that baby needs to have teeth in order to use this method, and that's totally false. Their gums are so powerful and made to chomp, chomp, chomp. So they do not need to have teeth, and they can just go ahead and eat whatever you're eating, with a few exceptions. We'll get to that though. They can go ahead and eat whatever you're eating, even if they don't have teeth. And then one other thing I want to mention is that breast milk or formula is still 100% more important for baby than food at this stage. So you need to make sure they are still getting their milk before giving them table food or adult food. And I would recommend doing that about 30 minutes before mealtime. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the things that you need in order to use the baby-led weaning method. So you don't need much, honestly. The bare minimums of that you need are your baby and food to feed them. That's pretty much the only thing you actually need. However, some things are a little nice to have. So first, a place to sit up. They need to be sitting upright when they're eating. That could be on your lap, which I have done before, but most likely it's going to be a high chair. So a high chair is really helpful. I like ones that don't require much cleaning. They're kind of just bare minimum, but it's up to you. Whatever you have is going to be totally fine. I also like to have some bibs. We have just regular ordinary bibs. They also have silicone ones that are super nice, but because you can clean them really easily. But we just have traditional ones. And then I also like to give her real utensils, like a solid spoon, not like the plastic kind that you can get that they often give for babies. I like the real solid ones. And I even give her like a toddler fork. And that's just because I want her to get used to the idea of using a spoon and using a fork. She really can't use them now, but I can preload a spoon and she can try to get that in her mouth, and the same thing with a fork. I can preload it and try to help her get it. And then she can also try to start using it as well. But 6 months is a little young for that, but you get the idea. And then the other thing that you might want is a place or a sheet or a mat to protect your floors to put under the high chair. We personally don't do that. We have a hardwood floor, so it's pretty easy just to sweep up at the end. But if you don't, or if you just don't want to deal with cleaning up your floor, some people have mats or a shower curtain or something like that that you can put under the high chair that will catch any of the mess that baby throws, because they do throw food. So now we'll talk about what to give your baby, because I think this is the part about baby-led weaning that surprises people the most, and that is that you give baby whatever you're having. with a couple exceptions, but for the most part, if you're having a meat, a potato, and a vegetable for dinner, your baby is getting a meat, potato, and vegetable for dinner. Now it's just cut a little differently so that they can eat it properly and not choke, but you pretty much give them whatever you are having. The exceptions are honey. They cannot have honey in any form, not with cereal, not on toast, not by itself, no honey, not in barbecue sauce. That's one that's kind of hidden there. So no honey whatsoever before 1. The other one is cow's milk, and you do not want to give them that before they turn 1 either, no matter if they are a breastfed baby or a formula fed baby. Cow's milk to drink is only after 1. Now, they can, depending on which school of thought you follow, have dairy or cow's milk in ingredients. So depending on who you ask, some say no dairy at all before 1, and so you could just no dairy whatsoever, but some say dairy is okay. I believe the CDC and the WHO and Baby-Led Weaning, the book, does say that you can give dairy, things with dairy in them, so yogurts, cheeses, pastries, cake, that sort of thing. But there is another school of thought that says the baby still don't have the digestive enzyme at the time. So what I would suggest is doing your own research and seeing what you prefer. For us, what we've done with our kids is we have introduced slowly dairy products and watched to see how our baby is doing digesting. So if we feel like they're not really digesting, or they're having a really upset stomach, or they are being really colic after eating dairy, then we will pull back on it and maybe try again in a couple weeks or a couple months. But it's totally up to you and who you want to follow for the dairy guidelines. The other thing you may want to do is limit sodium and added sugar. Babies can't really process that well, and it's really not that healthy for them, so you want to watch that, the amounts that you're giving to your baby as well. And as far as drinks, babies really don't need drinks at this age. Your milk or formula is totally fine for what they need. You can give them up to an ounce a day, not more than that, and they probably won't even have that. But if you want them to start working on using a cup, or if you want them to just, if it makes you feel better to have a drink with meals or something, then you can do that. But you really want to limit that because they really don't need it, and it can actually mess with their stomach if you do give them to them. Little Miss Juliana has woken up from her nap, so she's gonna join me. Okay, so you can pretty much give babies anything you're eating with those few exceptions, but then how do you prepare it? So the best way that I can tell you to prepare it is to think about your index finger. You want foods to be cut long and in the thickness or shape of your finger. So meat can be just sliced into that shape, vegetables can be sliced into that shape. I will link a picture, or try to pop in a picture of this video with some examples of how you can do it, but you can just Google that too. And it's not hard at all, just as long as baby can pick it up and grab it and then also eat it, so long enough to do that, then they should be totally good. The one thing you don't want to do is give them purees, because that's going to confuse them. So you don't want to give purees. You don't want to give those baby food pouches that they can squeeze, because that's just going to confuse them as well. And shifting consistencies like that can also cause them to choke. So you don't want to confuse them. You want to keep them exploring and learning how to eat foods. The only thing I should note is that things that are already in puree form, like applesauce, soups, mashed potatoes, those are totally fine, because that is the natural state that they would normally have those in. So for those kinds of items, you can preload a spoon. As I had talked about, you could preload it with mashed potatoes or applesauce or something, and then they can try to pick it up and get it in their mouth, or they could just use their hands. You could, for soup, you can give them, a piece of bread and let them dip it in the soup, and they'll get the soup that way. You could give it in a little cup, however you want, but it's a little hard for them to get it, but they can still have it in that state. There you go. You want a fork? You want a spoon? And then in regards to the applesauce pouches that they make, I know those have saved us sometimes, but just wait to give it to them until they've mastered eating. So for Isabel, it was probably just under a year that we could give her those and she wasn't confused anymore. So you want to wait for that time frame. When you are doing baby-led weaning, you also do not want to feed them. You don't want to spoon feed them. You don't want to put something in their mouth because one, that defeats the whole purpose of baby-led weaning where they're trying to learn to eat themselves. But two, that can cause them to choke because you don't know the sizes that their mouth can hold. And so you really want to avoid that. And when you're just starting, they might not eat anything at all. They might just play with food, they might just throw it, and that's totally normal. On the other hand, they might actually start eating it, which might surprise you, which is also totally normal. All babies are different, and so you don't kind of know what your baby's gonna do until you start it. Our 3-year-old Isabel, she kind of played with things. She maybe nibbled on it, but didn't actually eat anything for the first, good few weeks that we did baby-led weaning. Juliana, on the other hand, like day one, it was like bite a piece of carrot and swallow it. So she has completely loved food more than any baby that I've seen from, day one of 6 months old. So your babies are all going to be different, and you just have to see how they're going to handle it. One of the biggest worries that people have when starting with food is that what if baby chokes? Now, what you need to know for baby-led weaning and starting solids doing baby-led weaning is the difference between choking and gagging, because there is a huge difference. And gagging is totally normal and helpful for babies, whereas choking obviously is dangerous and you will need to remedy it. Weaning, you always want to be with your baby. If they're eating, you want to be with them because choking is silent and you will not hear it. So taking your eyes away from them for even a couple seconds could be potentially hazardous. Now, that being said, with my first Isabel, she never actually choked once. She gagged a lot, but never actually choked. And so far, a couple weeks in, Juliana gags a lot, but does not choke. So I can't say if it's rare or not because I've only had 2 kids out of many, many in the world. But from what I've read and from my experience, choking is not normal, not the normal, and gagging is very, very normal. And when you're a new parent and going through this the first time, it can be really hard to watch. I know watching Isabel gag on things, like you think they're choking almost because it's so abnormal to hear and you don't see babies doing that often. But it's actually their natural reflex. Babies have very sensitive gag reflexes in order to protect them. So they learn how to determine the size of portions they want in their mouth. They learn how to swallow it versus spit it back up. They're learning all sorts of new things by exploring in their mouth, and gagging is, part of that process. Sometimes if it is kind of stuck and they're really trying to get it forward, because gagging moves things forward, they might, gag with vomit, and that is terrifying the first couple times. But she's actually never done that. Isabel did it all the time. So, again, babies are different. But it's totally normal. They will just literally go back to eating like nothing happened. You're more mortified than they are. And so what you really do need to do, even if that happens though, is stay calm, because babies feed off of your energy. So if you start to panic or if you get, thrown off, then baby might start to panic, and that could cause them to choke. So you do need to make sure you stay calm. I recommend watching a video on the difference between choking and gagging so that you can kind of see the difference. She doesn't gag that often, so I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to get a good video of her doing it to show you, but you can Google it. There are videos of it, and I will show you videos of her eating at the end. And if they do gag and it looks like they're having a hard time, but they're making noises, then it's totally okay. You have to let them work it out. In fact, you do not want to ever stick your fingers in their mouth to try to pull something out when they're gagging, because that can lead to choking, and that's actually really dangerous to do for baby. So you have to make sure that you can stay calm, that you don't want to reach in and help them. You just have to trust that they are made to do this, and that they will get it out on their own, which they do. So make sure you prepare yourself for those types of things before you start this journey. Now, choking, on the other hand, is silent, and it is dangerous. Obviously, it can kill your child. So you want to make sure that you are always with baby, that you know what baby, they will likely be alarmed and panicked if they cannot breathe. So I would also recommend looking up how to do the infant Heimlich maneuver before you get started, where you just kind of, I can maybe demonstrate it a little bit, but you kind of hold baby upside down and then you give them blows to their back. Now, that was a horrible demonstration because she's not choking and she's resisting, but make sure you look it up and you do know how to do it in case something were to happen. Again, I've never had to do that with either of my kids, but I think it's way better to be safe than sorry. The last thing we'll talk about is allergies, because I get asked about allergies a lot. So allergies in the baby-led weaning method, it's not really taken into account unless you have an immediate member of your family allergic to something. Then there's really not that much cause for concern, because babies can show symptoms of an allergy the first time they eat a food, 3 days after they eat a food, immediately as they're eating a food. They can show it on the 7th time they've tried a food, not just the first. So really, allergies could come at any time. So baby-led weaning states that you don't need to, try one food and then wait a few days and try another food. You can just give them all the foods at once. You don't have to wait certain time intervals. You don't have to try just one at a time. You can do, your meals, everything you're having, just as is. Peanut butter and eggs and some of those common allergens, they're also all okay. Again, assuming that there's no one in your immediate family that has that allergy. So if you're giving peanut butter though, it is recommended that you, not recommended, it is a requirement that you do not give peanut butter by itself, because think about you eating a spoonful of peanut butter. It is really hard to kind of get down and swallow. It dries out your mouth so much. So you want to make sure if you're giving peanut butter, you're giving it with a cracker, with an apple, with something, so that they do not have that dry mouth that could cause them to, choke and have a hard time figuring things out. So that's it. Those are the basics that you need to know in order to get started with baby-led weaning and starting your baby on solid foods. There are no first foods. Whatever you're having goes. If you have any questions about something that I talked about in this video, please don't hesitate to comment below. I'd be happy to give more direction or answer anything that I can. And that's all for today. We'll see you next time. You say bye-bye? Bye-bye. Bye-bye.